Larkin. Here. Mr. Painter. Mr. Redner.
Here.
Mrs. Reese. Mrs. Riley.
Here.
Mrs. Taylor.
Here.
Mrs. Waxler.
Here.
Mr. Zeppos.
Here.
Mrs. Zilkowski.
Here.
7 and 10.
Thank you, Mrs. Fowler. We had an executive session on August 2nd to discuss the legal matter and tax negotiations. And if you notice in your agenda, we have new curriculum, or we have new technology from Monday, or from Thursday to Monday to follow curriculum. Cover some of the same things, we decided we better have them back to back. So that will start in September.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend last week's meetings, but I didn't see that discussion in either of the agendas combining the two committees. Was that discussed at those committee meetings, or was that going to be up for discussion?
It wasn't discussed in August, but we have had discussions about it.
Last week. Okay.
Oh, and
It was not on the agenda.
we did talk about it, we talked about it prior to August meeting as well. Yeah, I know I asked Terry to switch, she would be able to.
And I know, hold on.
I know we talked about combining the committees and meeting times, which is fine, but meetings are going to be held at the time that they are now scheduled. I will not be able to be on either committee because of my work. I can't do a Thursday meeting.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I know I jumped a little bit. We're moving both meetings on Monday, 11 and 12.
Okay, so it's not,
Curriculum and technology are going to be back to back. on
that's
Mondays.
not what the email that went out said. It's scheduled for Thursday.
That's just one meeting that's
Okay.
scheduled. The rest of them are typically Mondays, but because of the Labor Day holiday, we couldn't have a meeting
Okay,
Monday.
all right, that's
Okay.
good. Thank you, I was confused. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. So, now that we're all less maybe confused, possibly or more, we're still gonna press on.
So we'll share good news to start. We were able to check in on the digital version of Ready Eagle. The article posted today that Wyomissing Junior Senior High School has hit the top 500 schools in the nation, as posted by newspaper number 367. And so that's certainly a proud moment for our high school. Very glad that they picked up the article. Wilson was also mentioned, so there's only two school districts in Berks County. Each one were totally announced out of Pennsylvania, so that's definitely a good news item. Secondly, I just want to address and draw attention, there was an e-alert sent out this afternoon to our parents' grades K through 4. We had school packets go out a little earlier this year, and due to, as you look at the personnel agenda, a number of folks being hired. Information was sent out, there are a number of teachers whose they were listed as TBA or to be determined in those packets. The e-alert went out, and they're hoping to have that ready for parents at the end of the day on Wednesday, so they can know who their child's teacher is. A lot of it tonight was just needing to approve folks, get them into e-school, and then really the intent of getting information out to parents and the information in those school packets that was sent ahead of time. So we apologize for any inconvenience that that might have caused, and as of Wednesday, end of the day, you will be able to access your home access centers so you can use your child's teacher.
We're gonna do committee reports now. Mr. Zeppos? Finance?
Yeah, it didn't seem like the lights were on, but.
You can do my report if you want.
No, I'm good.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We met last week after a little break this summer, went over a whole bunch of things. And I'm going to be going over a lot of numbers, dates, so let's try to get through it. At the Finance Committee, we reviewed the following items. We reviewed the 2017 and 18 budget calendar. The budget process will be started by the administration during September through November of this year. The first real key date will be January 26th. This is the deadline to either make the 27-18 proposed preliminary budget available for public display or to adopt an opt-out resolution stating that the district will not raise the rate of any tax by more than the index. Another date is January 31st. This is the deadline to submit the Department of Education a copy of the opt-out resolution and related proposed tax rate increases. We'd have to vote on this by January 23rd at our January 23rd board meeting. February 15th, 2017, this is the deadline to adopt a preliminary budget if the opt-out resolution was not adopted. From there, May 31st, 2017, this is the deadline to adopt a proposed final budget. And then June 30th of 2017, it's a deadline to adopt the final budget. So that was one of the things we reviewed up through for our calendar year 2017 and 18. We then reviewed the tuition and special educational contracts, which are on tonight's agenda for discussion. We also discussed purchasing a copyright license. This is a license in a nutshell for us to get movies, music into the classroom, making sure we're not infringing on any rights. The license would be for each building and allow the district to show movies to groups of individuals as per copyright law. Even groups such as the PTA would fall under this and coverage of this license. It's about $1,000, $1,043 for this license, and this is for the whole school district, $1,000.43, not per school. So that was another thing we discussed. We then discussed the Delta Dental renewal in October. The administrative fee will increase to 13.28% of claims from 12.5%. The last rate increase took place over 3 years ago. We then discussed updates to the per capita and census. The business office is presently working on a letter for census survey. The letter and census form will be sent out to the board for review. And I'm sure we'll discuss when we get that survey, but in the near future. We also discussed the transportation contract with the current bus. The current transportation contract expired on June 30th. We've been working with Keystone Transportation on negotiating a new contract, and we hope to have this contract wrapped up by September. And so far, that looks pretty good, that contract too, favorable. Let's see, we then discussed the charter school tuition rates for the 16-17 school year. That rate is being calculated is less than what we budgeted. Plus, with our numbers for the 2015-2016 being lower than the 2014-15, we should see some budget savings for this charter school payment. We further reviewed 2015-16 budget projections, and right now, as of right now, this is last week, the unaudited projection is for a surplus of over $740,000. This amount could change due to the accounts that need to be done for the year end. Some of the highlights were we collected more in business privilege tax than budgeted. Miscellaneous revenue was higher than budgeted due to selling some equipment. And then savings in wages and benefits, mostly due to teacher turnover and long-term substitutes. Finally, we reviewed and discussed the 2015-2016 cash flow. And basically pretty good. I mean, revenue's 97.42% budget to actual, and expenditures 97.66% budget to actual. Pretty darn close. And I don't know if I left out the kitchen sink, but I think we went over all that stuff. So that's my report.
Mr. Zeppos. Mr. Boyer's going to do
The meeting was held on August 3rd. August 3rd at 8 o'clock in the morning. We discussed many things. The first thing we discussed was the football field fence project. There was a pre-bid meeting held on Wednesday, August 3rd at 2 p.m. There were 8 contractors scheduled to be there. The bids were due actually today. We talked about the facility storage building. The bids are due for that on the 16th of August, tomorrow. There are 6 interested bidders on that project. All the permits have been approved by the borough, so we're good there. The tennis court renovation project. That pre-bid meeting was held on August 2nd. The bids were due the week of August 8th. There were 2 bidders that bid on that project. District-wide camera update. the entire project was very successful. There's a few punch list items that need to be cleaned up, but otherwise we're good to go. The administration team, was successfully trained, and now we're working on deploying training to the receptionists in the buildings. The junior senior high school HVAC project, the equipment has been ordered. The contractors have been put out to bid the project through train. Not all the permits have been fully issued yet. We're still working on a few of them, but that project is scheduled to start on time at the end of August. Summer cleaning, very successful, actually 2 weeks ahead. 2 weeks ahead, and it was all thankful for the great equipment and the hard work of our custodians. But the new equipment that was purchased really helped cut down manpower and some time. So that was really good news, and Mr. Capincelli did a great job there. Walk-in freezer, we discussed this project. This is something that is on the preliminary discussion as far as transferring the freezer that's in the athletic field house up into closer to the kitchen project. It's just preliminary talk right now, but we're exploring different options to do that. The freezer, compressor, or condenser unit in the athletic field house is basically at the end of its useful life, so we're just kind of holding on there. But we will continue discussing that at next future facility committee meetings. The last thing we discussed, there are two doors at the junior senior high school that are in need of some repair. They're outdoor access doors. The total cost of the doors is about $20,000, and we were discussing ways of fixing or replacing those doors at that meeting. So it's still kind of out there. One door is going to definitely need to be replaced sooner than later. The other door, we can probably wait to get some more accurate bidding on that door to see if we can maybe cut the cost down a little bit. But we did discuss options there. And that was basically the entire thing.
Curriculum Committee met on Monday, August 12th. 3 teachers from West Reading Elementary Center, Jody Weierbach, Erica Holman, and Shauna Estat, came to our meeting, which was really great, and provided the committee with an overview of the Summer Math Boost program that was piloted at West Reading this summer, which was part of the summer safari from years past. During the program, teachers introduced students to the idea of a growth mindset as they covered math topics such as place value, multiplication, division, problem-solving strategies. Teachers utilized iPads and the Nearpod technology along with traditional math manipulatives. They also created math in motion activities to make math fun and engaging. Overall goal was to give students the extra boost to walk into their new math class with confidence in the fall. I think there were 27 students that took part in it, and they're going to monitor the kids throughout the year to see what worked, what didn't work, how they can change it. But kudos to these 3 teachers because they worked really hard on this program, put in a lot of extra time, and after every day they were reanalyzing the program, so I think they did a really great job. Secondly, the committee reviewed the 2016-17 novel list for grades 5 through 12. The list was developed by teacher representatives from all 3 buildings to ensure instructional alignment. The team also determined a process for how teachers can suggest additions or revisions to the novel list for final approval by the curriculum committee. Committee also reviewed the professional development design for this year, and it incorporates feedback from teachers and outlines the topics to be presented. The committee also reviewed the assessment calendar that will be posted on the district website, and everybody on the board should have gotten a copy of that as well for your reference. During the 2016-17 school year, the district will begin the process of revising the comprehensive plan. The new comprehensive plan will go into effect July 2018. We have a full year to develop that comprehensive plan. The committee also reviewed applications for 2 foreign exchange students and 1 foreign exchange agency called PEACE, Pro-American Educational and Cultural Exchange. We also reviewed the transportation request for Model UN in Washington, D.C. for February 16th to 19th. 24 students and 2 teachers will attend that. And finally, as a reminder, the new teacher induction training will be held tomorrow and Wednesday. They are anticipating having 9 teachers participate. And the topics covered will include district overview, educator effectiveness, code of conduct, and board policies.
The technology committee met August 4th, and the first thing we reviewed was instructional technology. And it was noted that the student device backup is going very well. There have been limited need for repairs, so the good news in that is our insurance costs actually decreased this year. And then we also reviewed the Apple School Manager. Under technical support, Mr. Ernst noted that the web help desk tickets have dramatically decreased, and he appreciated all the help of the interns, which have now made this a manageable process. He also reviewed the numerous projects that have been going on over the summer months, which include district-wide backup, email security, email storage, West Riding review and enhancement of all the technology at that facility. We did note that there'll be a full day of training in October devoted to technology, along with noting website renovations that are going on and changes to our district website, and also a new lunch software called Primero Edge. And it was noted at the end of the meeting that technology would be moving starting in September to transition after the curriculum meeting at noon, which is normally held on Monday.
Personnel policy. So on August 3rd, we held our personnel committee meeting, and as you look to the agenda, we've been very busy this month hiring. We are almost filled with all of our positions. We have a number of support staff to still fill, a couple other long-term sub positions, but we're in pretty good shape from where we are right now, but we still have time, and we'll bring the rest of them to you on the 20-minute. You'll see that Mrs. Benz, our coordinator of child accounting and central registration, her retirement is on the agenda for your consideration, and also Dharmendra Patel, who Mrs. Lukowski just referenced as one of our interns. He was just phenomenal. He was one of the Penn State interns, and excuse me, Penn State's intern program have just been terrific. Dharmendra actually had a job elsewhere and decided to stay on this summer to help us with some of the technology. So it's just a very nice partnership that we've established with Penn State. Number of absences and appointments of new folks coming to join the Wyo family. Support staff, some changes. Towards the end of the agenda, I just want to recognize and share a little bit about the substitutes. We have been in the process of moving over and transitioning to Kelly Services. And Kelly Services has been here for about, I think, six or 8 meetings. It has gone very, very well. I sat in on all of the transition meetings, had the opportunity to meet our substitutes, so that we can help make that transition for the substitutes going to Kelly Services instead of Wyomissing employing them. Kelly Services will now employ them and answer any questions. And it was very beneficial to be in those meetings. We had a training then with the principals and the secretaries for how we move forward. And as a reminder, moving towards Kelly will open up our pool to have greater availability of substitutes. They will continue to recruit substitutes for our use so that hopefully we reduce the shortage of subs and increase our fill rates. So that is personnel. Moving on to policy, we met on August 2nd. And on policy 2, policies came up for revision, hazing, and also investment of school district funds. Under the hazing policy, pretty much what changed is the language was amended. Before, hazing pretty much primarily impacted college students. It now comes down to secondary students, and actually the way our policy is written, it covers all organizations within our district, K through 12, and it also impacts student organizations on or off campus. I made sure that I talked with Mr. Ferrandino, so that our coaches are aware. Tonight it's coming before you for first read. Once it's approved, that this becomes one of the policies that our coaches are aware that they're signing off that they have seen. The language in the policy changes that there are stricter consequences for violation. As I mentioned, this will be a part of the coaches' handbook. Investment of district funds. This was before the board back in June. It was another revision to how districts can invest funds. It actually opens up options. But as Mr. Boyer was clear to point out, this is really, it it's a protection policy, and certainly the school board will always have the authority and say on whether we're investing funds or not. I think that's all. Underneath, policy, we will have a discussion about how we're handling right to work requests. That was also discussed in policy. There were only 2 board members of the policy committee meeting, and so therefore, at that point, we decided we would bring this forward to a full board discussion. Right to work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have the BCIU report. Our meeting was held on June 16th. There was no meeting in July. At the June meeting, we re-elected our officers, President Tim Hefner, Vice President Robert Quinter, Treasurer Gary McEwen, and Secretary Elizabeth Hune. We approved second reading of policies, cooperative purchasing, federal fiscal compliance, travel reimbursement, federal programs, food services, and conflicts of interest. These are the policies that we here as a board discussed on June 13th. The next BCIU meeting is August 18th.
I will continue to be Mr. Painter. Thank you. Mr. Painter has no report. That's the easiest one. However, they will be meeting on the 24th of this month.
Mr. Reese is not here for the fancy report. Mine is Temporary Educational Foundation.
It's an easy one too. I have no report and we'll be meeting September 8th.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to make a public comment tonight? Okay, Mrs. Vicente, the superintendent's report.
Thank you. Under curriculum and technology, it is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following curriculum and technology items numbered 1 through 5.
May I have a motion, please? Second? Is there any discussion? Mrs. Feiler, may I have roll call, please?
Mrs. Larkin,
Yes.
Mr. Redner,
Yes.
Mrs. Riley,
Yes.
Mrs. Taylor,
Yes.
Mrs. Waxler,
Yes.
Mr. Zeppos,
Yes.
Mrs. Bilkowski,
Yes.
7 yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Feiler.
Under finance and facilities, all of the items listed under finance and facilities are for discussion. Is there any discussion?
I just have a question. Item number 5. What does that firm represent us for?
That firm represents us for special education.
Moving on to personnel and policy. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following personnel and policy items numbered 1 through 13.
May I have a motion, please? Second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? I would just like to thank Mrs. Benz and Mr. Patel for their service to district. I know they were an important part of our family here. Any other discussion? May I have roll call, please?
Mr. Redner,
Yes.
Mrs. Riley,
Yes.
Mrs. Taylor,
Yes.
Mrs. Waxler,
Yes.
Mr. Zeppos,
Yes.
Mrs. Bilkowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Larkin,
Yes.
7 yes.
And under policy, personnel and policy, the items up for discussion are policies, and also now's the time for the right to know discussion.
Okay, so just let me give a little background. In the agenda for the second meeting of each month, the agenda lists right to know requests received for the prior month. That practice began in 2010. Recently, the listing of right to know requests has been called into question. The right to knows listed in the agenda was on the policy, it was on the policy committee agenda meeting, as Mrs. Vicente mentioned. Mr. Painter and I did discuss it, but there was only 2 of us there, so we did not feel comfortable making a recommendation to the board. So we're bringing it here to have a discussion tonight. To help frame the discussion, there are a few options we can consider that were raised during the discussion. We did have a policy, So option A would obviously be to maintain the status quo. Option B would be to maybe remove the names from the chart to continue to list what was asked, the time and the money and who worked on those right to knows. And then option C would be to remove the item from the agenda totally. If we chose to do that, we would have to take it to policy because in our policy it is listed as an agenda item. And we would also possibly want to discuss if we choose not to have it in the agenda, does the board still want to be made aware of right to knows or any part of that information? So.
You're saying we can amend, we can do option B, but option C would have to go back to policy? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
I mean, obviously
all-
option A is status quo. B,
Right.
you said just remove the name, that doesn't have to go to policy?
No, because under the policy, it lists all of the agenda items, so it just lists right to know, it doesn't specify
Okay.
under the right to know listing what needs to be there. So, I think somewhere, Mr. Painter, I think had sent an email. Mr. Painter is not in favor of publishing anything at that point, so let's get the ball rolling. If anyone else wants to weigh in?
I'll start since I brought it up, I think, in the May meeting, June meeting. And then I missed policy last week, so I did send some thoughts to the policy committee, but not the whole board. I would agree with Mr. Painter, I think we should eliminate them completely, and I'll give my reasonings. I think listing them kind of goes against the spirit of the Sunshine Law, which is freedom of information, and I think that we need to be fully transparent to our community members, and so I don't feel that there's a need to advertise them monthly for seeking out information from the district. And I think if we're assigning costs to them and advertising them because they are costs, I think that was brought up at one of the meetings, that we advertise them, so because of the costs involved, then I think then that warrants sharing all of our costs every month with the community. I don't think we can pick and choose that people have asked for information and this is what it's costing us, but then we're not listing, let's say, how much our chaperones for the spring concert cost us each month. I know, like a Kutztown school district on Friday updates go out to their email alert people. So I mean, it's very possible we could have full disclosure for our community, but I just feel it sends a bad message listing these monthly, that it's kind of in a vein of, making people feel badly or shaming them into asking for information. And that might not be our intention as a board, but it certainly is a perception out there. And I myself don't want to continue that. That's my thought.
What is the purpose of publishing the right to know information? Like why do we do that in the first place?
I wasn't on the board in 2010, so I can't speak to why it was started. For myself, I find it valuable to me as a board member because I do like to know, not back from summer vacation yet. I do like to know what questions the community has, what people feel is not being answered, what's on their minds, what concerns they have, and I think that Right to Knows is a good way to find that information out. And I think Mrs. Waxler might have mentioned this in our discussions, that also if a community member has information that we don't have and they come to us to talk to us about it, it puts us in a really bad spot when we also don't have that same information. So for those reasons, I feel it's valuable. On top of that, and this might go to why do we list this cost as opposed to not listing other costs? I think most other costs can be found in our budget, in our monthly statements, but right to knows are kind of outside their other duties for our administrative team. They spend their time fulfilling these right-to-know requests. It's helpful to me to know how much time they're spending on right-to-know requests, because that's time not being spent on their actual outbound job duties, not duties as assigned.
Just getting a little confused too. Listening to Mrs. Larkin's point. Are we saying that the right to knows, we're not gonna publish the name or the dollar amount?
That is up for discussion.
Okay.
We can choose to,
And I guess I agree, is the dollar amount necessary to post? Is that part of the discussion?
yes,
Is that part
that's
of the
part of the
concern?
discussion. What does this board want to publish in the agenda? And depending on what we decide to put in the agenda, we, as a board, if we still want information for ourselves, we can have that put out in the board packet, so that's not on the agenda, so.
Or not to publish on the agenda, so it is whether you can continue is one of the options, or not to publish, or restrict what is published.
So we could remove them from the public display, add it to a board update on Friday, and even eliminate names, just so we're aware of what the community is looking for, which I also agree is very important for us. If they're feeling they're not getting the answers or the information, I want to know that. I just don't see the need to assign a name. And I'm also a little bit leery of the cost, because some of that is a fixed cost, like the lawyer bills, which is a fixed, 15-minute increment bill. But others are costs made up from a formula, I believe, based on whoever's fulfilling that request. And if that's a salaried person who's being paid by the district to do a job and is paid a salary, not an hourly rate, we've created an hourly cost for their time, but in reality, them fulfilling the right to know is actually part of their salary job. Unfortunate if it takes time away from their other duties, but we're not paying them an extra hourly fee to fulfill the right to know, correct? Right, so I feel like those two pieces are a little less important. Maybe the lawyer's fees, certainly, I would be okay seeing how much right to knows maybe cost, but not the other costs in my own mind when I'm thinking about those kind of things.
Mrs. Madison?
I'll just chime in. I mean, I see this from a lot of different viewpoints. Having done my own right to know and not even knowing at that time that it was published or anything like that, I kind of felt like I asked for the information retrospectively. I don't mind that people knew that I asked for the information because I thought it was worthwhile and that maybe it could be shared with other people. I think as a board member, whether it's published in our agenda or not, it's important for us to know who's requesting what information. Just to say that somebody asked for such and such, I want to know as a board member who asked the question. Do you know what I mean? Because if I see people in the community and whatnot, I want to know who's asking for what information. From the dollar sign perspective, I also think it's important, yes, it is a salaried position, but there can be people who request a lot of right to know. They may not have an understanding of what it's costing the district. And I think that it's fair to let them know, because honestly, I didn't know there was a cost associated when I did a right to know. I didn't know any of this. I just knew I wanted to know what I wanted to know. And it was good information, but anyway. So I think the dollar amount is important. When you put it all together is where the shaming kind of comes from that you talk about. But I think that all the information is worthwhile. Maybe the way we put it out there isn't worthwhile, because you never want to make someone feel as though that information isn't attainable. But I think from a board perspective, it's nice to see how much it's costing us, because it is taking someone away from their regular job. And number two is who's asking for what information and maybe why they're asking for it. I know we're not allowed to ask that, why they want to know, but the other request I would have is while people are putting together information in right to know stuff, that we as a board get the same information that that person gets, that it's distributed to us as well, so that we can review it. Because if it's something from 2008 that's very far from my brain and I'm not thinking about it, yet someone's asking for it, I want to see the same information.
Are you going? Sure? Okay. I actually agree with bits and pieces of everybody. I do think as a board member, it would be helpful to know what information is being asked from the community. I don't necessarily feel that I need to know who's asking, but I do like the idea of whatever information is being given to that individual is also shared with the board, just for our knowledge. I don't think that's something that we need to publish to the public. You know, whatever we decide, I don't think it needs to be an agenda item, or that the details of the cost and the name and everything need to be publicized to the community. I think we could let them know we received a request for information on special education, NOREPs, and that it took whoever 3 hours to get the information together. That I think is valid, but I don't think we need to assign a cost or put the person's name with it.
Just, do you think it's, you want to set an agenda, or you just want the information as a board member?
I think just as a board member, again, the update or the board packet. Okay.
George? I too agree with bits and pieces of everyone. I personally do find value in the public knowing the cost of these, but I do also feel that the public doesn't really need to know who's asking a question, because I think someone said it might shame someone into not asking a question, and that's what I don't want. I don't want, what's the saying, that the worst question is the unasked question, and I don't want someone to not ask a question for fear of their name being up in black and white in this board behind me. But I think, I mean, if the board can find out who is asking questions, I also would like to know. I don't know if that can be segregated, that we know and others don't, but I mean, I would like to know a name. That way, if I do see someone in the community, I can, you know, maybe talk to them, you know, outside of this sort of atmosphere. So, in summary, I do find value in the public knowing the cost of what these right to knows. Because, I mean, to your point, Susan, I agree with the conceptual idea of the salary, but I also agree. I also feel that someone can be taking a lot of time on something that's taking away from something else. If it's, you know, a tedious, and I don't want to there go shaming almost by saying a tedious right to know, but if there's something that's costing, you know, 5 to 10 hours of someone's work week, I don't think that's what we want our administrative team doing. So I kind of spun all around. I believe I sort of gave my opinion. So.
Well, I think if we just want to throw out the opinions, I'll try to collate them in my mind, and then maybe summarize and see where we are, where I feel like the board is maybe telling me better.
Again, I think we're on agreement of bits and pieces. I just think there should be some sort of protected transparency with this. I mean, we want people to feel comfortable with it. At the same time, we want to be transparent, but then not make people feel bad that this is costing X amount of money. So I think it's important for us to know who it is, to these points that we, you know, in my short term on school board, we've heard certain people ask questions repeatedly, and we want to be able to get the answers to them. And I think sometimes we can put a solution with that person, so we can actually not just get, you know, not just do a job, but get a job done, so to speak. Again, I don't know if it, my own opinion, I don't know if it makes sense on here. Maybe they might be intimidated to discuss these things with us, but I think we should also know what's going on and the cost associated with it. Because again, I kind of threw that word protected transparency a little bit, just so we can have a healthy discussion and communication with it, but also watch our costs and think. So that's, again, in the spirit of Ryan Renner, I think I did a whirlwind as well.
I think I'm
You got it, though?
Does anybody else want to add in?
I'll add in. First thing I wanted to note about the whole right to know is there was a lot discussed at first that this was something only we did and that we were doing something And the first search I did was governmental, and they don't do the exact same thing, I'm sorry. They put the person's name and they put what they request. They don't put a dollar value to it. In hearing everyone's discussion here, I guess I would lean towards, for transparency, still listing what has been requested, so everyone in the public knows what's been requested. Doesn't necessarily have to have a name assigned to it. And as far as the cost, maybe that's something that's just tracked as a general line item, so either quarterly or at the end of the year, this is how much you can still report that we've spent on right to know requests. So that's my suggestion.
So Maria, are you suggesting we don't itemize it by this?
Individual
Just
requests.
say this is what the right to knows cost for this reporting period.
So we have that information if needed, yes, for tracking.
Okay, I'm gonna throw a wrench in the works and throw out like an option B and a half, okay? So it sounds like, for the most part, the sticking point is names and potentially a little bit of the cost, itemizing the cost. So what if we kept the chart in the agenda, eliminated the names, left what was asked, okay? And then what administrators or who in the district worked on it, okay, next to each right to know, with their hours, okay? And then we could do a total for legal bills at the bottom for that month. Because it seems to me, that would be kind of a compromise for Susan, where yes, we have the legal bills in there, and the hours of the admin time, but not the, hourly rate of the admin time.
So it's still what? It's still what?
Can I ask a question on that though? But if you're not putting a name up there, is there really a problem with putting a dollar amount next to it?
I suppose,
As long as we're gonna tabulate it anyway, if it's not associated with a name, I don't see a problem with keeping an amount up there. Because the general public should be able to see how much is being spent on right to knows every month.
okay.
But I still, as a board member, would like to know who's requesting whether we put it up, on the board or not. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I
So
do.
I'm fine with saving the name from the public, but still, as a board member, I'd like to have that information.
Okay, how about, so we can list how much each right to know request cost and legal fees? Do we want to put an hourly rate from the admin team?
Do we have to put a rate, or can we put how many hours that person spent?
Well, I think we
Without
should.
a dollar amount.
I think we should put hours regardless.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It's whether or not you want to put a cost associated with their time.
I don't think we should, and here's why. And I apologize if I offend anyone, but when you take an administrator position, you know that you're not spending this many hours a week on this task and this many hours a week on this task. And sometimes things come up that pull you away, and then other times you have more quote unquote free time for those other little projects. I think we and the taxpayers pay an annual salary. So by listing the cost associated with those man hours, it almost implies that it's overtime pay. That's an additional cost to the district when really it's already in the salary. Does that make sense?
So would we be okay with listing what was asked, the district personnel who worked on it, the hours that district personnel spent, and legal fees for each right to know request? That would be in the agenda. Are we all okay with that? And then what we can do for board member edification is board members can be given the actual right to know request. We can send them out at the end of each month, the actual right to know request. So that will have, who was asking and what specifically they were asked for.
And the answer they've gotten? Can we get the answer?
And we can also, and that I think, but just for time and expense, I think that will all be just put in board docs. I don't think we're gonna show up with a packet on our table. That will be in board docs, okay?
I think that's I think that's a good compromise, and it kind of covers everything, and the information is all there for board members, just in different places, and then hopefully we can eliminate the feeling of the public being embarrassed or ashamed that they're requesting info.
I think we should almost.
So, you know, all seriously, I mean, those are some pretty powerful words. I mean, has anybody felt that way or expressed that? Just wanted to know if there was a complaint about that
Yes,
recently.
we've had it.
Yes.
So are we good with our decision? Okay. Option B and a half.
B and a half. That's,
And so there will be no need to change policy. You know, we can, for the next, the August 29th meeting, we'll have the new right to know part of this. Okay? Excellent. Now, where are we? Totally lost. Old business, anyone? New business? Under new business, we have committee meetings to discuss. I'll turn my microphone back on. Items A and B, I'll discuss those, I'll talk about those first. Providing committee agendas and minutes has been discussed over the last few months, and beginning in September, committee agendas will be listed on the school website under School Board tab, and they will post the Friday before the committee week. Okay, so they'll be up there when we get them. Approved committee minutes will be posted the Friday after they are approved by the committee, so they'll be a month behind, but they will also be posted to the website. We're currently working on a common format for agendas and minutes for all the committees. So is everyone, any comments on committee agendas and minutes?
That'll be under where?
The
Board?
school board tab. I'm assuming we'll have a committees tab.
Yeah, so we've started to talk about this in cabinet. So underneath the school board tab on the website, where you get the policies, there will be committees, and then underneath that committee link will be every committee with the agenda and then the approved minutes. We're working also, because we realize that every committee does agendas differently, so it's an opportunity just to kind of shore up our practices. I think for the public to see them, it's gonna be much easier that it's in the same format. So that's what cabinet is working on.
And when will that be effective?
September.
Okay, so another item in regards to our committee meetings is item C. The question of allowing public comment at committee meetings was also raised, and I'd like to have that discussion here tonight as well. Would we like to change our committee meetings to allow public comment? We currently do not. Mr. Painter also,
It's in your packet.
in the blue packet, Mr. Painter couldn't be here tonight, so he sent his thoughts on that. He is on board with the agendas and minutes being posted on our website. And he would like to allow community members to speak at committee meetings under two conditions. First, that they make a request in advance of the meeting outlining the nature of their comment. Second, the committee chair consents to that public comment being allowed. He wants to leave some level of discretion with the committee chair to determine whether to accept public comment. So that's Mr. Painter's thoughts. Does there anyone else have feelings about public comment at committee meetings?
All right, so I do think we should allow public comment at committee meetings. And I think that should be blanketly allowed, not just up to the chair's discretion, because if one chairman doesn't want comment, then it can create an issue. I think we could look at adopting a policy similar to what we do for public comments at these meetings, where we limit it to 3 minutes, and notify the speaker that there's 30 seconds of their time left. I do think we need to do it though, because a committee meeting is a meeting, which is covered under the Sunshine Act. And if, I'm not an attorney, but if I'm reading the act correctly, we have to allow public comment at any open meeting to the public. And committee meetings are open to the public. So I think whether it's law or not, it should be best practice that we allow comments.
I don't believe it is required that we allow public comment at committee meetings. I'm just reading from school code. There is no requirement that public comment be allowed at committee meetings, although some boards are permitted by policy and some argue it is required when the board meets as a committee of the whole, which is why we do obviously allow it at our Monday night meetings. I do agree also that leaving discretion up to the chairs can put the chairs in a difficult position if they don't all apply the same standard to who would be allowed to speak and who would not be allowed to speak. I personally, for me, committee meetings are really working meetings, workshop meetings for the committee and the admin team to discuss and go through the agenda items, to develop recommendations for the board. I feel like the public does have a chance to comment at Monday night meetings before we vote on anything. I think that allowing public comment at committee meetings is going to change the spirit of our committee meetings. To me, they're working meetings. They're when the board digs down and really gets all the information they need to make a recommendation for the full board. So that's my position.
Okay, so I can see your point, but the opportunity for public comment is before we discuss anything. So if someone's coming to a committee meeting and they're not allowed to comment there, and then they come to this meeting, they're making a comment on something that was discussed before the board gets the information of what was discussed at the committee meeting. If I'm yeah, because according to the agenda, doesn't public comment come before committee updates? No, I'm wrong, I'm sorry. Okay. I don't know, just a question.
Okay, so I see both sides of the argument. So two ways to look at it. One is, I think it's great to have community input on anything that we do, because that's what we do, is we represent our community. That's what we're supposed to do. Being curriculum chair, I can say that rarely do I get any public in my meetings. So it's not a huge issue for me. Here I thought curriculum was most important, but who knew? But anyway, but my point is that I think that some people from my curriculum perspective would be, if they're gonna show up at my meeting, it's not going to be for the overall good of the school, but sometimes it's for the overall good of that child, or whatever their concerns are. But the flip side is that I've never gotten an email. No one has ever emailed me to say, hey, I hear you're talking about, this math program over the summer and I'd like to get my kid involved. Like, that just doesn't happen. And so I kind of feel like if we're going to be putting our committee agenda out there prior to the meeting, it's a perfect opportunity for someone to email us as chairpersons to say, hey, I'm concerned about this, I want to come to the meeting. Then I see the flip side of, if they want to make a comment or something like that, that they want the whole, we could say, have a blanket policy that if an email is brought to our attention, that we read it at the meeting so that it is shared with the rest of the committee. That's another way to look at it, or that we do let them have a comment, like Terry said, the 3 minutes, and we'll hear what you have to say. But I would love to see people reach out to us as chair people. That is the one thing that I feel is really lacking, is nobody ever emails me, nobody ever attracts me at the grocery store to say, hey, tell me about that 5th grade curriculum. So, I just kind of feel like there's so many different avenues to reach out to us, and people are not utilizing those ways. They really want to just come to a small community. So I see both sides of it, but that's my point.
I'll chime in. I do get a ton of emails and a ton of texts, and I'm not sure why that happens, and I try to filter them off to people. Usually to follow the chain, the proper chain of communication. I'm kind of reading School Code 710.1 a little differently, and maybe it's because it's the way it's written, it's kind of up for interpretation on each, at each school district. It says, We shall provide a reasonable opportunity at each advertised regular meeting and advertised special meeting for residents of the political subdivision, ... to make public comment on matters of concern, official action, or deliberation. Now, I take that to mean any regular meeting, meaning committee meetings. So my interpretation of code, which could be wrong and should probably be checked, is that a committee meeting is a regular meeting, and it is advertised, and that would fall under this rule for me. This looks like a textbook description of the school code, so I'm just actually reading the school code. So again, I think maybe we could get some guidance on that. I think my own personal opinion is, why not allow people to comment? I think we should encourage people's participation in our discussions. I think it would certainly help with some relationship building with the community, but I think we should be encouraging information sharing rather than discouraging. It kind of falls in line with the right to know. But I will say this, I try to get to as many meetings as possible, and I've noticed we're a little inconsistent. Sometimes we fall prey to somebody in the audience and then we do address them, and other times we completely ignore and shut them down. And then other times I've been at meetings where people have actually been invited to speak. And I think from a consistency standpoint, that does not send a very good message as a board as to what we're doing. I personally feel like bring it on and ask questions. I certainly think that it's appropriate, and that's the way I read the school code myself.
We did get clarification from the solicitor, and what he told us was that the Sunshine Act was amended in 1993 to add 710.1, which addresses public participation at public meetings. The public participation requirement in 710.1 only applies to meetings of the board or council of a political subdivision or an authority created by a political subdivision. The use of that phrase within 710.1 thereby restricts public comment to board council meetings as opposed to agency meetings, which is defined as a much broader term that would encompass school board committees. Since an agency is not required to offer the opportunity for public comment, a school board committee does not have to do so. And just the tail end, our policy actually states that if you want to make a public comment at our school board meeting, I believe you're supposed to submit it ahead of time. And we have not required people to do that. We have allowed them to make public comment without submitting it ahead of time. That's in our actual policy. If someone asks a question that I know the answer to, or it's a simple, very straightforward question, I'm more than happy to answer it. When someone asks a question that I'm not sure about, or is a very big question, I'm not comfortable answering that without being fully prepared, because I would never want to share inaccurate information at a public meeting. And the same thing goes for, and so you say people are put off by not getting answers. The same thing would happen at a committee meeting if someone came all this way to a committee meeting to make a public comment, and then we don't answer their questions. Because we didn't have it ahead of time, we don't have the answer, it's supposed to be public comment, not public question and answer time. So, there, that's.
And I like what I'm hearing personally. And I kind of like what Lori said as well, and I kind of like what Susan said too as well, bring it on, maybe, not so much, but it is a statement, it's a statement. Could we maybe discuss, let's say the first 10 minutes of a committee meeting is for public statement. So it's not saying, hey, you only have 90 seconds, but it might be a couple statements, that way we can get the ideas and then bring back the answers to it. I mean, last week's finance committee, and that was what, 2 hours? It was about 2 hours and 20 minutes that we were in here going over this. So I agree with you, we get so much done, and it's really that time that it's sometimes very time consuming. Some weeks it's 4 hours a day in this. So, I'm sorry not everyone's lined up for math curriculum, but in finance, these are some big community issues going on. that, I think maybe we could allocate it a time that says, hey, this is for public comment, what statements do you add that then we can discuss with the board. I have no issue with that, but I do have an issue with, a line out the door. We're just not gonna, we're not gonna get a lot done at that time. So, what it's worth, there's a lot of discussions we have, whether it's facilities, whether it's finance and policy, maybe not as exciting as curriculum, currently, but you don't know. So, when we say, just like we have here, public comment maybe in the beginning, where we just started off with a couple minutes, 5, 10 minutes. Maybe there's no one that shows up and we get into business. Maybe there's a group that wants to, it'd be nice to hear what they have to say. I wouldn't mind, is what I'm trying to say.
George, can I just ask a question on that? So are you saying, my question is, if we're going to talk about it in committee, do you take public comment before the discussion, before you've had a discussion, or do you take public comment after they've heard you talk about it? Do you know what I mean? Like, is this a before or an after? Because if you as a committee haven't talked about it, there's no way that you can answer questions. You can certainly take their thing, but if they say, we're gonna be talking about the 5th grade math curriculum, and we haven't talked about it yet, how do they make public comment on it? So that's my question, and to Susan too, are you talking about before the meeting or after discussion?
I mean, my inclination